It is Emily with E2 Photography. Erin is not with us today, but we are going to talk all about camera settings for extended family sessions. So most likely you are watching this video because you have an extended family session, or you know you're going to be shooting a larger group of some sort and you want to know the best camera settings. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. And stick around until the end because we have more information and more stuff just for you. By the end of this video, you are going to feel a lot more comfortable and confident going into your next extended family session. And for the best photography tips and tricks, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell for notifications of future videos. Let's dive into camera settings for extended families. So one of the things I just want to quickly touch base on is what we edit our family sessions with. So we get this question a lot, but we use Lightroom Classic to edit all of our sessions. I also want to quick talk about the lenses we like to use for our family sessions. Our absolute favorite for any sort of family session is typically our 50mm, and we use a Nikon 1.8. We also sometimes with very small families, typically just families of 3, or our seniors as well, but we like to use the 85mm, the Nikon 1.8. That's a really good lens as well, gives great bokeh. If we are shooting a larger family, we would typically like to shoot with a 35mm lens. We don't own a 35mm lens, but if you have one, that would be excellent for an extended family shoot like this. Okay, so let's talk camera settings. The very first thing we're going to talk about, we're going to be talking about all the different parts of manual mode and settings we recommend. We're going to dive into where we should be focusing. We're giving you lots of good stuff today. So let's talk about ISO. ISO is the very first thing we set when we get to a session. So it really depends on the time of day with what you're going to set your ISO at. We typically are shooting 2 hours before sunset, 1 to 2 hours before sunset, and we are almost always at an ISO of 200, or sometimes we'll bump up to an ISO of 400 if it starts to get a little bit dark outside. And so like it says here, we increase our ISO as it gets darker. But 95% of the time at any type of session, because we're natural light photographers, we are setting our ISO to about a 200. So once we've set our ISO at a session, the next thing we like to do is set our aperture. And we are going to set our aperture based on the amount of people that we are shooting. So let's look at some examples here. So when we are shooting 1 to 2 people, which isn't necessarily a family session, but when we are typically shooting at an f-stop or an aperture of 2.8 to 4, anywhere in between there. Once we get more people, once we get up to 3 to 6 people, we like to be at about an f4 or a little bit higher. And if we have more than 6 people, which you're going to with an extended family session, we are going to bump that up even higher. So maybe an f4.5 or anywhere from there to an f7. So the more people we continue to add and the more rows we're going to have, the higher our f-stop or our aperture is going to be. And the reason for that is because if we shoot with a higher aperture number, a higher f-stop number, we are going to be able to allow to have everybody to intact sharp focus. We wouldn't want to shoot at an f1.4 with an extended family shoot with 3 different rows, because we're going to have people on the outside that are blurry, people in the back that are blurry, and it's going to be a disaster. So the bigger the group, the higher the f-stop. So now let's look at some examples and what our aperture or our f-stop was set at in all of these different scenarios. So in this one here, we were at a 3.2 for this family of 6. For this one here of the extended family, we shot this at an f5. And for this one of the 4 kids here, I don't know exactly what we shot this at. It was probably an f3.2, but you could even be as low down as an f2.8 because they are in a nice straight line and on the same plane. This one here was shot at an f2.8. Comment below and let us know what types of videos would you like to see from us here on YouTube. We'd love to know. So one thing we like to do, if you followed us for a while, you know we like to keep things very, very simple. So our goal is to figure out how to simplify every part of our photography business, shooting, editing, all of that. So one thing we do when we're dealing with aperture at a session, we know that with a family session that we can be shooting at an aperture of, if we're shooting individual shots of just each kid individually, we could be at an f2 if we wanted to, and we can still get sharp focus on that kid. But maybe we were just shooting the family at an f4. Instead of switching to an f2, we keep our f-stop, our aperture, the same for the entire session. We do not change it, and we still love our images. So that is just one way to really try to help relieve some stress and simplify things, is we really try to keep that f-stop the same, so we don't have to be thinking, okay, switch it for the little kid. Oh, now we're going back to big family shots. Now I got to move it back to an f5 or whatever it might be. We can keep it consistent and we're still going to love those images. Okay, so we talked about ISO, we talked about aperture. Now let's talk about shutter speed. So for shutter speed, we typically like to think about double the lens length rule. So what we mean by that is if we're shooting with a 50 millimeter, we're going to double that and shoot at least at a 1/100 or higher preferably, but we're always saying 1/100 at the very least. Now, if we're shooting at with an 85 millimeter, we're going to shoot at least double that at a 1/170 or higher. To be 100% clear and honest here though, we are typically, regardless of the lens we are shooting with, we really try to be at least at a 1/250 or higher, because a lot of our poses deal with movement. And if we're anything lower than that, we do start to get some blur in our images. So we want to be very careful with that. So those are our typical settings for extended family shoots. But now let's talk about a little bonus to this video about where we typically focus in different family posing scenarios. So with this first image here, we have mom and dad, and they are doing the little airplane pose with the little baby here. What we're going to do here is we are going to always focus on the baby. And you can tell if you look really close, mom and dad have a little bit of a blur to them, but that's okay for us. We want tack sharp focus on the baby because that is who is the center of attention here. Same goes with this shot here. Mom and dad are out of focus. We kind of like that look, but we have tack sharp focus on the two boys here. So in this situation, you could focus on either boy. I'm assuming we focused on the boy on the right with the denim shirt on. It doesn't matter though, if they're on the same plane, it does not matter who you're focusing on, but we probably picked him in this situation, so they both got tack sharp focus. Same thing with this image here. The girls are on the exact same plane, so we could focus on either of them. And when I say we can focus on either of them, what I mean is we can focus on either of their faces or their eyes, however close you can get. But typically, if we're doing a close-up shot of an individual, we're going to focus on their eyes. If we're a step further back, we're going to be focusing more on their face because that's just where the focus point is going to hit. In this situation, so what we were doing here with this pose is we had all of the kids lined up in a straight line, and then we had mom and dad come from behind and scare them. So in this situation, we are going to focus on either the little girl or the oldest boy there, one of them. They're in the center of the image, so we're gonna focus on one of them. For this extended family picture here, you can see that there are pretty much 2 rows, I would say, to this image. So what we're going to do when there are 2 rows, what we typically do is we focus on the front and center person. So in this situation, there really isn't a front and center person, but I'm assuming where we focused in this one was probably the little boy standing up front. I do think if you're at an f-stop of 5 or whatever it might be, if you focused on grandma and grandpa in this situation because they're in the center too, you would still get sharp focus on everybody in the image. Now in this one here, you can see again, you have 2 rows. You kind of could argue that you have 3 rows because the one girl is a little bit ahead of the other kids. So in this situation, I think we would have focused on the little girl that's closest to the camera. So then everybody else still fell into sharp focus. Again, our aperture was probably high enough to where regardless of where we focus, we were going to get sharp focus. So hopefully that was helpful in giving you some ideas of camera settings that are good, where to focus, all of that. Now we shoot with our Nikon mirrorless camera now, which is excellent, amazing. We can't say enough about it because it does do face and eye detect and kind of cheats for us and kind of helps us pick the focus point without having to think. When we used to shoot with our DSLR, our Nikon D750, we selected the focal point for each of those. So that's where it gets a little tricky on making sure you're picking the right spot. But regardless, hopefully that was helpful and gave you ideas of what the ideal camera settings might be for your family session. Now, if you are new to photography, still not really sure about manual mode, it's a little bit confusing to you, we do have a free 1-hour training that you can attend. It's absolutely free. It's in the description below, the link to join. And it is going to simplify manual mode and take it step by step and explain it and our ideal camera settings and how we simplify it at sessions. And then we are also going to give you real life scenarios and how we would solve those and what settings we would adjust in those scenarios as well. And if you did like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with a friend so we know to make more videos just like this one. And if you don't already, follow us on Instagram at e2photography. And we will see you next time.